welcome to Headlines to Insight, the N&M show.
We're your hosts, Nate,
And Matt,
and today we're going to be talking about what happened recently in Venezuela, along with how it could show the United States developing into more of a world police state, and is that a good or bad thing?
so to start, Venezuela.
Right.
Like, is it is it okay to just go into a country and take their president, even if people don't like them? Is it okay to just say we're going to your home? Like, it's like if someone said we don't like you, so they drove up to your house, except in a helicopter, and just stole you through the roof.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
So, I think I'm gonna play here just the side of I'm gonna pose on the side of I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'm gonna go ahead here and say, you know, what else are you really gonna do in Venezuela? But I mean, like, Venezuela's boring. uh, sorry. But no, in all seriousness, um, the Venezuelan president, air quotes, that dude, like, he wasn't doing good stuff, obviously, and not saying that we had a ton of right to just go ahead and just invade Venezuela and take their president. Probably not, the best thing to do. But at the same time, if if people don't step in when we see nut jobs like that taking over, and it's not just a Trump thing or the current political state thing or anything like that. No, I think this is more international than that. This is more universal than that. I think that what we did in Venezuela isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing. I think maybe with who we have in charge, it could turn into a bad thing, maybe a scary thing. But I think I think that it's a little overblown in some cases. What are your thoughts, Matt?
I think that we need to rely more on the people themselves. And instead of having, you know, big country who isn't threatened because, if you threaten them, you have no chance of winning, and rather having the people who deal with the issue be the people who are most affected by it, instead of people from completely different continent who don't who don't live the life you do, do who don't have to live with your same problems.
Right. Yeah, I see your point, and I think in a perfect world, I agree fully. In a perfect world, it should be in the hands of the people who live there, in the hands of the people who deal with it. But I'm going to talk a little bit from realism here. So yeah, I think as a worldwide society, that's what we should. That's what we want to do. That's what we should. That's what we should want to do. We want to be able to say, yeah, you know, if some evil dictator is rising up in a country, we want to have the people be able to dispose him and put in, or him or her, and put in whatever person they think should lead them. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a corrupt world. And in a corrupt world, a lot of the times it's you have to take the best of both evils. It's the best of two evils. So which one is a greater evil? And I just think I would argue I would rather take my chances with the United States than, letting somewhere like Russia or China run everything, because I like my freedoms and I like living under capitalism mixed with a bit of socialism. I think that, through all the ups and downs, like through everything, America is so proven that we can and we will usually, eventually, do the right thing.
I think that's less just America and more like the world in general. It can take hundreds of years sometimes, but people eventually go, wait a minute, this maybe isn't the greatest thing. Maybe we should change. Maybe it's not even because they don't like it, but maybe just because there's something better. Why do more countries have democracies and such? Because people got tired of having, like, people were tired
Yeah,
of having one
people didn't
person
like
ruling
communism.
everything.
Right.
And when, for example, like China and stuff, when you had big empires with, like,
Like,
it's actually kind of similar to a problem today where, politicians are just politicians and you don't get
yeah,
to
they're
see them
not.
as people. Like,
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from a lot with this of like saying, you know, uh,
some, like,
you know,
eventually things will
eventually
change
things
on
are
their
are going to
own.
come to the better. Yeah, but I would just say this. In a lot of cases, there are people suffering. Look at let's zoom out a little bit on this, right? Not just Venezuela. Let's take a look at Mexico right now, or a lot of other Central and South American countries. A lot of those countries are run by the cartel, right? The cartels control a lot, and every single day, and the cartels also there are also smaller gangs and smaller criminals that are doing that are causing all these problems. Murder, people are getting murdered, people are getting kidnapped and tortured. There are, and the government can't do anything. The government's struggling to do anything because they don't have the same power and influence that the cartels do. So here's my question: why, as one of the biggest and strongest countries in the world, should we just allow should we just allow these criminals to run whole countries, kidnap people, murder people, do all sorts of horrible things to people, and we can't step in? Why? Because no one else will. Okay, and other people will be like, oh, but the UN bungles things constantly. The UN is basically just the U.S., but no one lets them do anything because with the UN, you have all these European countries who like just kind of rely on America being scary to have any sort of influence. None of them do anything to forward their own power. They're just like maybe their political power, but militarily, they're not doing anything. When we came into NATO, we asked that all countries in it like do 3% of government spending on defense, so that way if an invasion happened, it wouldn't just be, oh please America save us. It would be they can stand up for themselves. Some of the highest ones that they're doing is like zero point 0.3, and it's probably a bit of a low ball, but I'm trying to get a bit of a point across. It's just like, if not America, then who, right? Look at everything else. You think Britain? Like, what would you rather do? Put the world in the hands of Britain? We've seen how that ends. It doesn't work. It doesn't work with Britain. China and Russia are no goes because they're run by nut jobs. Most of Europe can barely even run a country the size of U.S. states. No one knows what's happening in Canada. And, like I said with Central South America, it's all run by cartels. Versus America, where you got, like, you know, where it's not perfect, but I'm going to argue it's a lot better than what most other places got going on. Imagine, Europe struggles to run one of their countries. Their countries are the size of our states. Imagine running 50 countries. You know?
Except for the fact that in the U.S., each state is bound under one law and all that. Still, but I think we're getting a little off track here.
A little bit, yeah. So let's bring it back in. America being world police.
So your argument is, if not them, who else? Correct?
Yeah. I have a few other things, but let's just say it's that for now.
I'm thinking that it needs to do more with the people. Because if the people can't fight for themselves and the people can't do anything without John US coming in, then it's all unsafe. Because if anything happens to US, everyone else is unsafe. And having an entire world pretty much be safety status depending on a single country is not great. And also, how can people? There's issues right now where people maybe don't necessarily trust the government as much. So if even the own people don't trust the government, like if people say, let people regulate the government. But if the people don't trust that the government will regulate the stuff, then how can they trust the government? And how can they trust that they won't, say, go overboard or be corrupt? And while corrupt politicians will always be something that can exist, it, it still makes it scary. Because
Yeah.
if you say, if everyone says, we don't want our nation to go do this, but say someone with more power says, "I'll give you stuff," it's
Yeah, I
still
understand
gonna
where you're
happen.
coming from of like, oh, but power and influence, it all comes down to that. But okay, realistically, just I'm going to talk in the sense of the real world. Power and influence will always have a greater voice over that of the people, no matter what we do, because that's just the reality of the world we live in. You wonder why big corporations can seemingly just do whatever they want. It's because they have more power and influence. Now, if you get pretty much everyone to rally behind something, you can't stop. There's a point where you can't stop the masses, but you really do. There are just sometimes you gotta just be able to say, okay, we're gonna take our bumps and everything's gonna be perfect, but it's gonna be better than what we got. Okay, I would personally, because okay, look at worldwide for a second. Look at most of Africa. Look at what's happening in the Middle East. Look at what's happening between Ukraine and Russia. As I've already mentioned, look at Central South America. What do you see in all of those places? You see copious amounts of copious amounts of corruption. You see wars that seem to be happening on the daily. That's probably exaggeration, but you see, dictators rising and falling seemingly every other month. And it's like, well, why, freedom for all and that, but why are we just letting people get murdered all the time? When we saw what Hitler was doing in Germany, when we saw that, we weren't just like, oh, well, they have freedom over there. We can't interrupt their freedom. We stepped in and we said, no, you can't just do whatever you want just because you're in charge of a country. And I think, as the United States or even, hell, even the UN, there are times when we got to just step in and say, hey, you guys are, it's been years and your country is still a complete mess. You're an economic ruin. You know, there's wars, there's murders and kidnappings, way more than any other Western country, or like most other countries. You're not up to standard. You're not up to standard. So we are gonna do. We're doing stuff about that. We're putting a stop to all this, to these problems. You guys now listen to us. And I know that kind of sounds like colonization because it kind of is. But my thing is, it's it's kind of like the original deal between Britain and the United States. The original thing they like super loose, just kind of like we are monitoring you guys, making sure stuff doesn't go totally off the rails, out of control. But you have your own freedoms. You can have your own government. And then if we see that there's some they're falling off, it's like all right, here's the standard that we've set. If you guys start falling, we let them know, right? We go to whatever to their local governments, we're like, all right, here's the standard that we're setting for you. Here's how you got to reduce the crime rates. We will give you whatever you need to do it. Tell us, we'll get you the resources, and then we're gonna give you time to do it. And if things don't change, we're gonna step back in and change them for you because it's clear that because then you're showing us that you can't handle actually making a change in any of this stuff. And I think it's gonna we're gonna save lives, we're gonna save heartache, we're gonna keep more people safe. Is it the most moral thing to do in every situation? Probably not, but sometimes I'm willing to be a little bit flexible on my morals if it means I'm gonna save some lives.
Same here, but still, like, if we make this all about influence, if it's all about influence, then you don't. The thing about influence is that you have to be a great speaker. You don't have to be a great politician. You don't have to be good at leading, You just have to be good at convincing everyone that you have influence, because it's not like they can just look behind your shoulder and see, oh, he has 3 boxes of influence. No, they have to. They have influence is like a giant bluff, pretty much.
Yeah.
You only have as much influence as you can convince people that you have.
Right.
And that means that if you just have people who are great at convincing people that they have influence, but aren't good at actually doing stuff, then it goes wrong. Like,
Yeah.
they won't actually do anything. They'll make bad decisions and end up hurting more people. And my issue with America, with the America thing, is that if America gains so much influence and nobody refuses and says, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing that," it's not like they'll suddenly just suddenly not have influence, and they'll still be powerful, and the people will eventually not be able to check the government because the government will have more influence than the people will easily counter or realistically counter. Like,
Yeah. Okay, I see where you're coming from. But I just okay. I think there are certain ways around this because yeah, I understand, if we give America all this power, it's going to gain a ton of influence, and that could mean that, whoopsie, one wacko guy here, and suddenly everything's, you know, the poo hits the fan, so to speak. But I just, in terms, because we got to treat everything in real life as like a, what's your risk to your reward? How much risk is something like what's the risk of something going wrong versus the reward? Because it's never going to be perfect. There's no perfect solution to anything, right? As long as we're talking about the reward, I think we can both agree on that.
yeah,
No such thing as a perfect solution because it's impossible. No, and there's also no such thing as making everybody happy. There's nothing that's going to be all or nothing.
there is no politics without compromise.
Exactly. So what I'd like to say is, maybe because I think what we've seen is, especially recently, if we don't take action on some of these things, the problems are going to get way worse, and the worse the problem gets, the harder it is to fix. Because is it painful? Is this Is this probably? Is it painful to do this stuff? Is it gonna Is it gonna cause some harm? Yeah. But do I think that overall it's probably going to be necessary to help thousands and thousands of people throughout the world live a better life so that people living, and maybe not even the world, right? Maybe the world's just a bit ambitious. I think the world could probably still be helped out by the UN if the UN could do anything. Because, I mean, how many conflicts has the UN stopped without violence? Like none of them. There's been a war every year. There's been at least one war every single year since like 2012.
You mean 2012?
No, 2012. Every year after 2012, there's been a war, or a war happening. So, I'm gonna say that it's unavoidable. Conflict is pretty much unavoidable. We're not just gonna skirt around violence and conflict. So I think we just gotta pick, because in all honesty here, history's written by the winners, right? History's written by the winners, and as citizens, we just we're not gonna have we don't have like a Superman who's gonna come in and know all the right things to do.
And that's always true.
We just gotta pick which nut job we want leading us. And I know that that kind of sounds a little nihilistic. That's just kind of how it is. We just gotta pick, like, well, would you rather live under the China system where it's well, corrupt guy picks his corrupt guy friend, so he keeps everyone in power. Do you want that, or do you want the American system, which, yeah, there's corruption. There's corruption in every system, and as long, as we're still talking about the real world, we can accept there's corruption in every system.
Here's what I'm gonna say.
It's like, what would you rather, go United States, where it's like, okay, some corruption here, some corruption there, but for the most part, we do pretty all right.
Here's what I'm gonna say. Nihilism is often realism, but there is no reality without optimism. So
I agree.
if we always say everything's gonna go the worst it can go, then what's the point of doing anything then? But that's not how it is, because
Yeah. So I'm
people
saying, like, I'm saying this with a hint of optimism. I guess, like, you know, I think we should, as nations, especially if we're talking about any sort of global police force, or global force that is going to protect people, all throughout the world without jurisdiction. I think what they should say is, like, there's a very high optimistic goal that they're always striving to achieve, right? And that's the thing, and it's like, not something like all world peace, because too broad. More specific, narrowed in goal that we can say, okay, here's what we're reaching towards. We might not get here perfect, but here's what we want to do. What are the steps to get there? What are the steps to get there? What's the best way to get there? How do we, it basically come back to that risk reward analysis. How do we make the most people, how do you benefit the most people while hurting the least? Just, I think that's just something to just think about.
that's more utilitarian like mindset, and I do mostly agree with like stuff like that. Like, you want to help as many people as possible with while hurting as least. It's simple human thinking. But sometimes you have to say, like, we're going to have to cause an issue, and we're going to have no other option, and we don't even know if it will lead to a solution. But
We got to just do it because we need to see if it works.
yes,
Yeah, I understand that fully, because that's the decision that the government is supposed to be making, right? Here's what we need to do. What are the steps we need to take to do it? Okay, this step's risky, but it could do this. Do we go through with it anyway?
the thing is, and again, I mentioned this earlier, do people trust the government to not constantly be trying to, like, do people trust that the government is thinking about the reward with the risk? Because, like, if if the government says, let's make a law that's going to do X, like whatever that thing could be, the people need to be able to trust that, like, the
They
people
are
should
actually.
understand that yes, it's going to cause issues, but can the people trust that it won't cause one issue and then another and then another and then another,
Right.
and it gets out of hand?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Go ahead.
like, if America is the world police, will that, like, how do people trust that that won't lead to too much influence, to power that people can't handle? How do people know that that won't lead to more people hating the U.S. and wanting to, harm citizens and harm people in general? How can people be sure that if they vote for someone, that person won't gain too much influence and suddenly nobody can do anything about them?
Right. Okay. So I think, because you're posing it's a very realistic question, and a very good one, and that's the question that you kind of have to answer when you're going into making any sort of government, right? Um, and I just think that, overall, if we're looking at it, there is no guarantee that the government is going to do what's right for the the will of the people. There's no guarantee.
And the people don't need a guarantee. The people just need to have reasons to trust the government. And when
Right.
people don't, then
It gets a lot harder to
it
get
gets,
anything done.
yeah.
So what I am going to say is mostly due to the Cold War era stuff, and this isn't just the United States. This is pretty much all countries. If you look at it, around the Cold War is when a lot of countries distrusted the government even more, because we had just seen all the corruption, like all the corruption that had happened in Germany got revealed. You had things happening in the United States like Watergate. You had some, kind of unsavory figures come into a lot of political power during this time in the United States, in Russia, in the Middle East. So it led to people just having less overall trust for the government, which I think really just hurt. Uh, it just hurt a lot of like productivity and like people getting stuff done. So that's why I think, and I think it should be a universal thing, international thing, especially if you're talking about any sort of nation that you would want to put into like a uh, world policing role. You should make whoever's in charge of the nation, or whoever's in charge of that world police force, preferably both. They have to tell you, like, okay, in the next however many years, like 5 or 10 years, you know, depending on how long we say the term limits are, in the next however many years, what are your plans to, like, what is the goal you're striving to achieve? What is the overall goal that you want to hit? Maybe it can be a little, we give them a little bit of leeway, make it, be a little optimistic. And then it's like, we judge how good they are based on how close they get to that goal, right? Like, let's just say, you know, just a little hypothetical situation. Let's say that some random guy, let's just go John, right? Pretty generic name, just John is president, right? If John's president, then he has to come out and tell everyone, my plan during this presidency is, just say, let's say he wants to reduce traffic deaths, right? Every year, he's like, every year, I want to reduce the amount of annual traffic deaths, right? So then we take a look at whatever the amount of annual traffic deaths is, and then we say, okay, so that's what you want to do. What is, and obviously, you'd have a bunch. This is just kind of being simple, just for the sake of the example. Um, but if that was like one of his goals, they'd be like, okay, here's your goal. That's your goal. And then we wait till the end to whenever he's out of office. So say he only gets like one term. So when he's out of office, right? If he doesn't get the re-election, how close did he get there? He's like, I want to reduce it by half. Well, how close did he get to half? Did he get 10%, 20, 30, 40, 45? Did he get to half? Did he do more than half? Did he do way less? Did he do a bunch of nonsensical garbage that didn't do anything? Right? And I think if we force presidents, and not just presidents, but everyone, all like if you're a political figure, even if it's for like even if it's just like a small area, you have on your running, you need to be running on these overall goals, and there needs to be a system in place of, well, if you didn't get within a certain amount of these goals, that you said you were going to do, then you did a bad job,
Get out of our government.
And you're done, Oh, you said you were gonna not get us into any random foreign wars, and then you backed 8 countries who were going into a war, and you started like a ridiculous war with like 3 smaller nations. Okay, well you did like the opposite of what you promised. You're done. You completely lied to us. You've proven that you're untrustworthy. You're not allowed back in governance. Right?
Taking a step back here, Historical example. Since you mentioned the Cold War, the government, you say that, like, they can't stop the masses, but they don't have to listen to the masses.
Right.
Look at Vietnam. There were constant protests and everyone saying, like, get us out of this war, and we kept fighting for
We
years.
kept fighting for a while, but finally the masses did win out in the end, and we had to pull out because public opinion was starkly against it when they started seeing what we were doing and that all of these people were dying. Like all of these American soldiers were dying. They were like, "Get us out of there. We're not doing anything in there." And I think that came from a lot of the anti-war sentiment at the time. And the other thing I'll say is
Well, and
it was
then
the only reason that the government fought it so hard, like fought to stay in Vietnam for so long, was pretty much just because they wanted to try to assert to the people they could do whatever they want, and they were just desperately trying to fight back against the communist uprising. When, let's be honest, in Vietnam it was kind of inevitable. They weren't going to save Vietnam. I know they worried about that chain reaction, but there was no saving that war. That war was lost before it began. You know, we had to ship soldiers and troops across miles of sea,
not like hundreds or thousands
hundreds
of
of
miles.
miles. Russia was right there. They were just right there. They could build a train and get it there in like a day. We were never going to win that. The only reason that the government kept us in for so long was because they were trying to show that they were more powerful than the voice of the people, but the voice of the people was right the whole time. And I'm not saying it's always right. I'm not saying majority rule is always right.
Indeed, there
Right.
can be, like, when
But
people don't trust experts, for example, like if people,
if enough people don't trust experts, they can do dumb stuff. But still, just being someone who's realistic, I'm gonna say, kind of coming back to one of our earlier points, over time, majority rule, and the majority of people, if given, given some time, given some grace, usually in the end will make the right decision.
but the thing is, during the time that can take, a lot of bad stuff can happen. In fact, some things, it's just like it shouldn't have started in the first place. Like with Vietnam, it should have been obvious. Like, we're gonna have to ship across the world. There's already a lot of anti-war sentiment because people are scared that, if big war breaks out, that we're all gonna die because, like, nukes and stuff. But
Right.
the government still goes, yeah, let's go to war.
Yeah, and kind of to keep going with that. So to kind of take that and zoom out a little bit and come back to our original topic, I would like to say that obviously there are terrible, like, racism. The majority of people were pretty racist back in the day. Was that a bad thing? Yes. But the other thing I'm going to say is, you know, did did one did one person ever solve some of these major issues? No, right? Obviously. But one influential person could help change some of these topics, change some of those issues. So I'm gonna say that uh, usually, if the majority of people want something, that's how we should play it, and then uh, letting the people themselves figure out whether their decision was right or wrong. We can't, because you can't baby the world. As much as I'm still arguing for we need to be able to step in and stop some of this stuff, the only reason I'm saying we should step in is because it's been years and years and years and nothing's happened. But
Bro really just went, nothing ever happens.
but it's been years and nothing happened because it was a bunch of it was just a bunch of it was a mess. It was a mess. The Middle East for years. It was just corruption and wars and terrorist cells, and it still is, even though the West is involved. because guess what? Uh, guess what? We as the UN does not support you going in there and trying to when America went into Afghanistan to get back for 9/11, nobody in the UN supported that. They were all like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! You can't do that." And I would just like to kind of argue and say that um, we as like not just America, but like most, I would like to say that if there's a nation, and I don't think that necessarily we had the best intentions going in there, but I do think that you know right now people should go. We should have the UN try to get into Afghanistan, oust the terrorist cells that are running it, give the government some actual power, and then not just immediately leave. Stay there for a while. Make sure that the crazy extremists don't pop back up and keep going. Same thing with literally, like, pretty much every country in Africa, because most of those are a nightmare. And the cartel run, uh, and the cartel run South American countries. Like, get them out and make sure they stay out, because how easy it would be for America, at least to start, just to oust the cartel from certain countries. It'd be ridiculously easy to oust the cartel because they're untrained. They're criminals with no training. The only reason they run anything is because they got fear and numbers. And it kind of brings back that whole point of, well, how much a role influence has on on the world. The cartels run this stuff because they have a lot of influence, and if they didn't have that influence, they'd just be another gang. So, I think as uh, as people who just care about the world in general and other humans, we shouldn't let criminals run countries. I think objectively that I don't I think it's kind of ridiculous to argue that we should just let them maintain control. I understand the point of we don't want to just go in and just force everyone to do things our way, but I don't think that's what we're doing here. I think what we're doing is getting rid of a net evil, of something that is only negative. There's nothing positive that comes out of from letting. There's nothing positive that happens from the cartel running a country. Everyone lives in fear. There's drugs all over the place, kidnappings, murders. Nothing. There's no positive. There's no bright side. It's all bad. It's all bad. So I don't think that anyone, any rational person, would have any issue with the U.S. sending troops down there, taking all these evil people, getting them out of power, putting them through trials, because we are America and we believe that everyone has the right to fair trial. So we put all of them on trial, right? We take all of these people, when we put them on trial, we say, here, these are the crimes you're accused of committing. Here's what you've done. Here's the evidence that we found. Here's the testimonies of literally everyone you've oppressed. So you can either accept the jail time or try to get out of it. And I guarantee you this. I guarantee you this. The cartels don't have enough. Like, yeah, they're filling their pockets, but not nearly as much as America has deep pockets. So we're definitely going to win most of those cases. And I'm going to say, if we get a bunch of those guys off the street, in jail, and then we just kind of occupy these nations for a while, make sure everything runs smoothly, just like, all right, government, here's your power, we're going to back you up, we're going to have troops down here for a while, make sure things don't immediately flare back up, right? Make sure we've learned our lesson from Afghanistan, right? Make sure the cartels stay down. And then we're like, all right, we will, we're going to keep checking in on you guys every so often. We're going to keep checking in on you guys, but for now, we think you're good. and then we pull out. Once we're pretty sure everything's good, then we pull out. Obviously, we come back every so often, make our checks, make sure that cartels aren't popping back up again, and if they are, we shut that down immediately. And guess what? Suddenly, all these people here no longer have to live in fear of the cartel busting down their door.
So I agree about like, like taking down the cartels, for example. Yes, very good thing, but it the issue is less removed and more replaced. Because if they stop becoming scared of the cartels, yes, but what if, say, they had a family member who was threatened by a cartel and was, say, made to sell drugs for them? They are just going to live in fear then of the US. Because now that loved one who didn't want to, deal drugs is now possibly facing, the rest of their life in prison or whatnot. And like that isn't going to help people. It's just going to make them scared of a different thing. And especially, and since fear, like with the cartels, influence or fear can equal influence, all it takes is one person running our country who realizes that and says, "Hey, I can turn this into ruling over another nation," then it devolves into madness. Like, it devolves into, again, everyone being against us, and then if everyone's against you, as you said, the majority rule can eventually win.
If everyone's
Even if
against you, you're gonna get
if the
right.
entire world ends up being against one country, we're not going to be able to do much about it.
Right.
Where will we import things? Who will we trade with? How will we improve?
Yeah.
When you
Okay.
can't because everyone starts to hate you.
So, I'd say that it's kind of I'm gonna say it's a little bit of a counter to its own argument, right? If America, because okay, America is very much capitalist. We value how much we, especially in government, especially the government figures, very much value the money that they make and the money that America makes because it means that they can spend more, right? So if America does an unpopular thing and every other country's like, dude, what the flip? You can't just do that. You know what? We're cutting trades with you. America will be like, okay, we're sorry. We won't do it again. And we'll learn, okay, everyone else doesn't like that. That cuts into our money. We don't like that. And then instead of, we just like, ha 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 ha, we're like, oh, well, there goes a bunch of our money. That's bad. We want that money back. All right, how do we get these guys back trading with us again? And not only that, but to your first point, which I think is a very valid point of, you know, what about the people that the cartel forced to work the jobs? Well, I'm gonna say, first off, so I think it's just gonna kind of be a risk benefit thing of like, okay, what are you looking about, right? Would you rather take 10 more years or however many more years of the cartel being in charge of these areas, making more people go into the criminal lines of work, kidnapping and hurting and injuring more and killing more people, or should we go in? Maybe we're not perfect. Maybe we're not perfect in helping everyone, but at the same, oh, jeez. But at the same time, can we afford to let them keep running things? As the world, and not just America, as the world, can we look at ourselves knowing that we could do something about all the people that are suffering at the hands of the cartel when we know we could do something? Is it going to be a perfect solution? No. But is it going to protect a hell of a lot more people than it's going to hurt? I'd say so. And yes, would people probably be scared of America? Yeah. There's no denying that people would fear American intervention after that, but I would pose a question: is that necessarily negative? If people fear American intervention, you know what that's going to make a lot of the crazy psycho dictators do? Say you have some psychopaths who wants to go who wants to like take over and genocide a bunch of people in some random country, right? If they see what happens in places in like the South American countries, Central American countries, when America comes in, kicks out the cartel, and is like, all right, you guys brought this upon yourself. You know, if they see that America isn't afraid to do that, we're preventing a threat before it happens. We're now this guy who might have originally, you know, been able to manipulate people, come to power, and then kill a bunch of people. Instead, now he's like, well, you know, I don't really want U.S. Army Rangers knocking at my door and killing me, so I think I'm just not gonna take over and kill a bunch of people. Guess what? Now I didn't. Now just ousting the cartels uh from places like Mexico and the rest of South America, we haven't just protected the people there. We're protecting people in countries thousands and thousands of miles away. Because now, you know, John Bad Guy isn't going to do anything because he knows that there's a chance America gets involved, and he doesn't want that. That's why I'm saying maybe not, you know, just America do it, but maybe if, you know, at least the UN could just stand up and, you know, grow a spine a little bit more and just put their foot down when things are happening that aren't right, and not just in the places that make them money, which I know is a big ask coming from politicians because they just want money. So we got to come up with some sort of incentive for them to. We'd have to come up with some sort of incentive to make politicians want to do it. Maybe, you know, just the power that it would hold, but but we need to be able to step in when something isn't right, when a country is being run by crazy people who are murderers, who are killing people, who are violating international laws, but we won't do anything. Africa, I want to zoom in on Africa for a little bit. Most of Africa is a storm of terrible people ruling nations. And guess what? You know how much the West cares?
Doesn't make them money.
They don't care. You know why? There's no oil. There's no oil in Africa. There's no money in Africa. They're like, well, you're not gonna give us a bunch of money, so, you know, screw you. Have a good life. And I almost guarantee you, the second the Middle East isn't profitable anymore, the West isn't gonna care about them. The West is gonna be like, well, you know, have fun, bye. And that's just because of how politics work. So I think that there needs to be a better system in place instead of just the West shows up. So now we got to try to do better. And that doesn't even work. 'Cause the Middle East is still a nightmare, even with the West. So I think there needs to be a system that isn't afraid to be like, all right, we're putting troops in here to make you guys behave because you've proven that you can't do it. If it's been like 10 years or more, maybe even less than that, you know, and we've given you freedoms and time to, and shown you how to form a democracy, and you guys still are, and you still have all these problems, then it's clear that at present you guys can't handle being a country on your own, and you need us to step in and change things, because right now people are dying, and we can't let that happen. That's what I think.
So, going back to, you know, the big question, like, should people just say, yeah, go in there and take out the bad people, you know? And overall, it really just depends, you know, like...
Right. Obviously. It depends on a lot of situations.
It can depend on, like, you know, is John Bad Guy in a mountain or underground or where we're not going to find him for 3 decades or whatever.
And also, maybe kind of, you know, coming to the history of it, who's the bad guy, you know? Right? Is the bad guy communist?
A better question. Who isn't the bad guy?
Right. Yeah. So I
To say
understand
that someone is bad, it's like
it can be a very
there's a
subjective.
quote. There's a quote that's like, I think it's from like Brian Stevenson or someone that's like, we need to ignore like people are more than the worst action they've done.
Right, yeah, I think that's Brian
For
Stevenson.
for every murderer, like I saw this movie recently, The Roof Man. He robbed like 45 McDonald's based on a true story. And why did he do it? He was tired of being poor and wanted his kids to be able to grow up having nice things.
Yeah, so I do agree there's a portion of it, what defines good and evil. Um, that's a huge, and it's a philosophical debate, and it's a troubling debate because I don't think there is a universal answer that works in every situation. So that's why I'm saying, okay, so we have the UN, we have and all the independent countries. What if we went to the UN and was like, okay, every country, we want all of you. We mandate everyone in the UN has to pitch in. Like they have to create a unit so they have to have another unit to their militaries that are like just international soldiers from every country, right? And have it be like a like close to some really good special force, like almost like pretty close to special force units. So it's like if John Bad Guy pops up in whatever country, deploy him, take him out. But before you go in, because honestly, I just don't like bureaucracy that much because I feel like it gets in the way of any sort of progress or making things happen. All of these nations, because there'll be a bunch of nations with their militaries invested in it, all of them collectively, they all pitch a candidate, and then those candidates are then, and then it's like it's not like the U.S. election was like, oh, we're gonna narrow it down to two. It's all of the candidates, kind of something that I'm pretty interested in, and we're gonna have an episode about later. Hope more super focused on this. Hopefully, um, is ranked choice voting. Well, basically, it's like okay, here's all the candidates for leading the international police force. Ranked choice vote. Okay, and then the winner of that leads them for whatever term limit we decide, and then after that, and then if there's and then we say okay, we have put our votes in you. We trust you. You are now allowed to make the executive decisions on when or when not we get involved with on when or not we get involved in another country's government. And I know it kind of brings up the who watches the watcher fallacy, but I think hopefully what would happen is because obviously we would know if they did anything. So if they did something that the majority of people did not agree with, then we say, okay, if they do something that people are like, okay, whoa, 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 you can't just do that. That's, that guy wasn't doing anything wrong. Why would you do that? And I also agree in second chances. But I think in order for people to deserve a second chance, they have to be able to acknowledge that what they did was wrong in the first place. And if you're a genocidal maniac who's been killing people in the country for years, I was going to say, I don't think you deserve a second chance at that point.
You've had plenty of time to
You've
be like,
reddened your
wait a
ledger.
minute, I'm a bad person. Like you've had plenty of time to
You've
do
reddened
that.
your ledger way too much. There's too much red. It's dripping with blood at that point. You've got to be ousted because you're just causing harm. You're not doing any good. So, and the reason that I don't think there should be a ton of bureaucracy during if they're like the leader of that international police force, there shouldn't be a lot of bureaucracy during their term, is because when you introduce bureaucracy, every decision is slow. And when it comes to something like this, it can't be slow. If you
It runs into an issue where it has to be fast, yet also unchecked.
it has
Like
to be
how
fast
do
and
you do
unchecked
that?
yet fair. Which
Exactly.
it's very difficult. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy thing. I'm saying it's going to be very difficult. I'm saying there's going to be mistakes made. I'm saying there's going to be lives impacted. But in the end, I think it's going to save and protect a lot more people than it would hurt. And I think we can both agree that if we were able to kind of figure things out, because think about it, founding fathers came to America. Did they know how they were going to run the government? Did they know it was going to be perfect? No. But they were like, well, we'll put things in here to make sure that it can change with the times, and we're just doing our best. And I think that's just what needs to happen. We need to put this in so that way, at the present and in the future, we can get rid of the horrible people that are in some of the governments, and really just and help all the people that have been hurt from the terror. I'm just going to come out and say, from the terror that has been instilled in them from some of these leaders. Do you have anything you want to add?
So I'd like to say before the end, like, the people, like, just people in general can be some of the most powerful people. Like, they don't have to be, a rich guy with $1 million. They don't have to be a politician. Like, if you have, like we said, it'd have to be fast yet unchecked. If you want it to be checked, which you would have to do for it to be fair, almost definitely have to do for it to be fair. I'd say one of the best ways would be, what do the people think? Like,
right, yeah, I agree.
I really like the game Frostpunk, and in that game, you sign laws quickly and almost unchecked. You don't just say, I'm gonna become an authoritarian dictator. Your people will get mad at you. And if their people get too mad at you, they kill you.
Yeah.
Or they exile you.
So, and I really do like this analogy. So the thing because it's very true to real life. So the only thing that I'm gonna say is, if bureaucracy happens all the time, okay, let's do a little let's just do a little delve into a fictional scenario here, right? Let's say that my idea of the international police force is established. They elect a leader. They have troops from all nations who are in agreement of it, and now all of those troops answer directly to that leader, and then that leader tells them what they do, tells them their goals for however long his term limit is. Let's just say, for example, term limit of 5 years, right? 5 years with possibility of getting reelected once. So you could have one guy doing it for a total of 10 years, right? And then we got to switch to a new guy. Because we can't have him getting super old. They got to be. And so what I'd say is, if we did, but let's say, just for my point, that there was some bureaucracy involved, and now, some bad guy, some bad figure comes out of the woodwork and starts running a country however he wants, because he's got power to do it, right? And now, in the perfect version of this, in my ideal version of it, he's got unchecked power, or he's unchecked. There's no bureaucracy involved, so he can just take his troops, go in, be like, boom, oh, you came to power, boom, all your influence is gone. You are now in international prison because what you did was wrong, and we're gonna, obviously punish the ringleaders as harshly as you can, and then, like, the lower level followers, just be like, guys, really? Come on, you can do better. And just kind of work on them in some rehabilitation, get them better. But if there's a bureaucracy involved, now it's, well, should we, is it right? Well, let's have a 3-hour meeting where we get absolutely nothing done. And it's like, at that point, so many more people have had their lives impacted and even ruined because we took too long debating instead of just acting. Acting irrationally is stupid in every situation, but that's why you need to put your trust in the. We have to be able to say, okay, this is the guy we're electing. We trust him to do the right thing, and we trust him to do the right thing, and we can't, we're not going to go back on it. This is who we've elected. This is who we've elected. We're hoping he does the right thing, and then if he does the wrong thing, you take him out of office when his term is up. That's how hopefully it should work. So, okay. Given all this information, I'm gonna say let's end this episode, episode 1,
question.
on this note. Like you said, to answer our question, should we put the United States as the global police force?
And is it good or bad?
Right. I'm gonna say, as a start, yes, we should. It'll be good in the beginning, and then we put it in the hands of the UN, establish all nations, as many nations we can get to sign on, united force to stop corruption from rising up, with an elected official from all nations, and from like one elected official chosen from all the nations involved, who we trust to do the right thing with a term limit, and then just having some sort of international police force, I think, is something that we should do, because it'll prevent a bunch of innocent people from dying.
I definitely do agree with like having some sort of, international police force, as you were saying, to, stop these sort of issues. And I do think it should probably start with a large nation like the US or
Like the
something.
US, and then,
But
it shouldn't
once
end.
you know that this thing is going to work for XYZ is going to work, then we need to start slowly or quickly phasing out the previous.
Right, or at least minimizing it, because the U.S. is always going to have a huge involvement in it because it's a military-related thing, so there's going to be huge involvement. But I agree with you, just kind of like bringing it a little bit down so it doesn't have total domination over it, and so it's not just the U.S.'s opinion. So I think that's where we're going to leave this episode off for today.
If you're still here at the end,
If you're still here at the
congratulations!
end-
You just watched an hour-long podcast.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to be trying to get out new episodes every
I'd
1
say-
to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's about when you can expect us to get these new episodes out. We will eventually. I think we'll release a plan about a few upcoming
Roadmap.
episodes. Kind of roadmap it out a little bit. A few things that we're thinking about to talk about is.
No, I'd say leave it a secret for now.
Oh, we're
just
gonna
for
leave it
fun.
a secret.
You did say talking about a ranked voting system that we could
Yeah,
do as
I
next
think that'll
episode.
be one in, and we'll have a. Hopefully, we'll have a visitor on for that. He's helped a lot out in his community when it comes to talking about ranked choice voting. He does a lot of stuff with it, advocates for it a lot. He's a little bit of a member of a small political group actually out in New Jersey. So, and he's actually going to be coming out to visit here soon. So, I can grab him, get him on. And then we got a few more things planned. Hopefully that roadmap will come out soon. Try to get word out that we exist to as many people as you can.
If you like it,
if you
let your
like
friends
this, if you like this, and you know people who would like it, let us know. If you have any topics that you want to hear us debate, let us know too.
If you have topics where you want us to go into super big detail with 8 million sources and whatnot,
With 8
let
million
us
sources, a bunch of statistics, we will do that, and hopefully we'll plan to release some episodes like that. We'll come up with this. Hopefully we'll get a good schedule for releasing super in-depth episodes on certain topics, at some point. Those may be a little bit shorter, but full of detail. Thanks for listening. This has been Headlines to Insight, the N&M Show, with your hosts, Nate
And Matt.
Goodbye.